Oh, hi there. Let's make a snake. But why a snake? Well, the answer is rather embarrassing actually. I thought of learning sculpting and I thought the easiest way to start was with the snake. It seemed the simplest creature, given that it has no limbs, no fur, and it's really just a squiggly line. Anyway, to make the snake I will use a stiff wire and then wrap it using some aluminium foil. I'll then bulk up the body using some polymer clay. Once I'm done with that, I need to create the scales. And to make the scales, I borrowed a technique that I learned from the channel called Life of Clay. It's an amazing channel and I'm deeply grateful to Mr. Life of Clay for sharing his knowledge. Anyway, what I'll be doing is I will create a tool out of polymer clay, to which I will give a concave shape to match that of the snake's body. After that, I will shave off the end of a bamboo stick to resemble that of the shape of a snake scale. I'll then take the tip to punch out tiny little patterns onto the tool. This way, it creates a very seamless pattern. Making this was much more challenging than how he made it look in the video, but anyway, I made about 3 different types to slightly vary the shape and size of the scale throughout the snake's body. After baking it, it's just a matter of just rolling it onto the snake, and there you go, a really nice snake pattern. I have no idea where the piece of wood came from, but it's staying there now. After I'm done with the scales, I'll move on to the belly part of the snake. To make its belly, I'll simply use a curved sculpting tool and gently create some ridges on its belly. And with that, the snake is somewhat completed. You can safely ignore the head part because I might deal with it later. For the color of the snake, I will give it a very green color. And the reason for that being, as you might know from the title of the video, this is a Slytherin Common Room from the Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy game. And Slytherin is all about green color, so green. But once I have spray painted the body, I will give a not so Slytherin yellow color for the patches of the snake. I understand that this is not a very Slytherin looking snake, but I thought it made it look much more intimidating. Now at this point the snake looks convincing enough, but I wanted to take it a step further and make the scales a bit more iridescent. In that quest, I stumbled across this glittery thing which you are supposed to put on your nails, of all things. Using the applicator that comes with this thing, I will apply this onto the snake scales. I'm not entirely sure how to best use this, but I think this should be good enough. After I've applied a decent layer of it, I will seal the whole thing using some UV resin. This would be rather important because I will be submerging the whole snake in resin and I don't want all these glitters to spread around. And now let me explain the diorama. But first, a huge thank you to Chumpy Onion and Mac2583 for suggesting and giving me ideas on the Slytherin Common Room. I hope you find this diorama to your liking. Basically what I'll do is I will stick this whole snake into resin. This would make it look like the snake is inside the lake that's next to the Hogwarts School of Wizards. I'll then flip the thing over and then connect a common room to it because the Slytherin's common room is on the basement. But as you can see, the snake's head is poking out sideways, and on the room beside it I will create a very liminal feeling with just a couch and a lamp. This way it makes it feel like the snake is searching for someone who usually sits on the couch but is not there just yet. It could be looking for its master, or more intriguingly, its servant. Now that you have an idea of what I'm doing, let's try to work on the resin. Yes, this time the resin came with instructions and labels. Also, as many of you have suggested, this resin is for deep pouring. So hopefully this time we can avoid some of the bubbles and warping. Not only that, but to avoid any sort of complications, I'll be using silicone mold instead of acrylic plates. After giving the resin a green color, I will simply pour it onto the mold. and then leave it to cure. Now while the resin cures, let's start working on the common room, starting with the floor. So far I've been creating floor textures using the foam core boards, but I think it's time to improve upon it. And for this one, I'll finally be able to try the new clay, the Ladol clay. To form the structure of the walls and floor, I'll be using foam core boards, upon which I will be slapping some of the Ladol clay on it. I'll make sure that it's thin enough to dry quick, but also thick enough so that I can create the stone textures. After that, I'll use a crumbled aluminium foil and create some texture onto the floor. After that, it's just a matter of cutting the clay into stone block shapes for the floor, and that should make it look much more interesting than just the foam core boards. With the floor completed, let's work on the walls. But to create the details on the skirts of the wall and the arches on the top, I'll continue the idea of using stencil and tools to create the details. So, to create the details on the bottom skirt, I will carve out a piece of balsa wood into the slightly triangular floral shape. This way, I can simply use it as a stamp to create some of the details. For the arches on the top, I will create a stencil in the shape of the arches. I'll vary the sizes accordingly so that I can create the arches in layers. Once I have all the tools in place, let's start working with the bottom skirt. For this, I'll use a piece of balsa wood and create a slightly elevated portion for the bottom skirt. After that, I'll use the floral stamp tool to stamp out the pattern on the bottom. The benefit of using tools like this isn't just to make the task easier. I think more importantly, it makes the whole thing more consistent and sharper. And that's really the main reason I'm trying to learn making custom tools. Once the bottom skirt is completed, I'll apply the same method for the top arches as well, although this time I'll create them out of layers. And there you go, a quick method to create a detailed wall. To create the huge arch gate here, I will also apply a similar method. To do that, I'll be using this disused key card and then cut out a cross-section of the gateway arch. Once I have sanded it down to a clean shape, I'll put a slice of clay onto a piece of wood. I'll then wet the top surface generously and then scrape it with my stencil of a tool. I'm being very gentle with my strokes here, and eventually I'll get a shape that resembles that of the archway. Once that's done, I'll peel it off the piece of wood and then stick it onto the wall, bending it along the process. Again, the process is really quick. Not only that, but the details are really consistent and straight. Once all the pieces have dried, I'm really satisfied with the way Ladol clay works. I enjoyed using it, perhaps more than dust actually, and it also dried relatively quickly. Perhaps the only downside would be that it tends to shrink a little too much, maybe a bit more than dust clay, but unfortunately that's something I'll have to live with modeling clay like these. Anyway, with all the pieces dry, it's just a matter of sticking them together. I've also made this column for the front to somehow hide the connection between the resin and the whole room here. Now this should complete the room because this time around I'm thinking of making the diorama look like a liminal space. So far in my previous dioramas, I've kept a much more populated and detailed structure. This time I wanted to keep it slightly minimalistic and focus on learning how to make detailed, clean sculptures. I believe that the concept of a liminal space puts a lot of emphasis on getting the details and the atmosphere just right, and that's something I'm trying to learn with my crafting as well. Anyway, that pretty much completes the room, so let's see how the resin is doing. I've been monitoring the resin curing process quite closely. I've shared my thought process on my membership and Patreon channels, but here is the final data sheet if you are interested to read on it. Anyway, pulling the thing out of the silicone mold was a challenge just as before, until it dawned on me that maybe I could reduce the friction using some alcohol. And I'll simply squirt some onto the sides, and there you go, it pops up just like a jello. The resin cured perfectly fine with almost no bubbles in it. The only thing I noticed here is that there are tiny little swirls in the resin, and a quick Google search says that this is because I didn't mix the resin properly, so I suppose I'll fix that next time around. So now let's try to trim down the excess pointy bits so that I can stick it to the Slytherin Common Room that we made just before. Now to stick these two pieces together, I thought of using UV resin, but I've learned it the hard way in my eerie diorama that UV resin doesn't really pass through a lot of things. To test this out, I'll be using this fluorescent paint which glows when shown with UV lights. I'll then gently move it down into the resin block, and as you can see, the block of resin is transparent but not so much to UV rays. So instead, I'll simply use super glue. I mean, I could have used PVA glue or Mod Podge, but they would take simply way too long to cure. To sell the effect of the liminal space, I'll be using this gateway as some sort of a portal. To make it otherworldly and magical, I decided to put some ripples using some UV resin. I've never done this before, but I imagine I just have to be patient with it. I'll build up the ripples using layers of UV resin. Ultimately, I think that it came out looking very interesting. Now before I work on the head of the snake, I want to add some furniture, and the first one I chose is this green lamp on the side that you can see from the movie Harry Potter. I believe this is a lantern, and I'll start off the lantern part using some UV resin that I coated onto an LED. After that, I'll trim off the top to make it look like a chimney. Once that's done, I will build up the bulk of the lampstand using some air drying clay. I'll then wind a tiny little strand of air drying clay to make it look like a snake. Finally, I'll finish it off with a rectangular base on the bottom. Once the air clay dries, I will give it a nice bronze type of metallic paint, and that should be the lamp completed. All that's left to do now is to stick it onto the diorama. Up next, I want the couch just beside the lamp. At first, I made the couch using air drying clay, but I simply couldn't get the curves that I wanted, similar to the one in Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets movie. So, in the end, I went back to polymer clay. And to make the whole thing easier, I will create a framework using some popsicle stick. This would essentially form the skeleton of the couch, giving it rigidity, making sculpting easier for me. After I've sculpted a general form that I'm happy with, I will give it some of the dents that you see in leather couches. Really, it's just a very simple process, but the whole thing required a lot of patience and minute little strokes to get everything smoothed out. But once I have a decent shape, I will give it some of the cushions, and I'll just end it up with a nice green color. Once the whole thing dries, I'll simply stick it onto the diorama. Now with this, it completes the floor, and I don't want to add more than necessary. but I think I'll add one more Slytherin logo onto the wall. The Slytherin house has several logos or coat of arms from Harry Potter movie or the Hogwarts Legacy game and many other fan-created art. But in the end I decided to pick the one from Hogwarts Legacy simply because I think it looks very cool. To create the logo, it's pretty much using polymer clay that I've stuck onto the used keycard. After that, it's just a matter of sculpting it out one touch at a time and then finally cut it out into the desired shape. Once it's baked, I'll simply give it a paint similar to the one from Hogwarts Legacy game. It's not really the greatest or smoothest sculpting piece ever, but I believe this is the best I can really do. With that done, I think it's about time I started working on the head. I have been procrastinating on this because I think it's simply too difficult for me. Now, most crafters out there would simply start with the most difficult one and see whether it's even worth doing the whole thing. That's probably a wiser way to do it, but hey, just because it fails doesn't mean it's a bad thing, so hopefully I don't screw it up. And as if a snake's head wasn't difficult enough, I decided to make it a skeleton. I thought the water surface would act some sort of like a cross between living and the dead, and that supposedly this snake would be somewhat of an undead creature. I took some inspiration from the Pirates of the Caribbean's movie of the undead pirates. Anyway, in a typical snake, the vertebrae would be much more compact and shorter, but I thought I didn't really want to bother with too many of it, so I decided to make it just like a normal mammalian vertebrae. Now, making this was extremely difficult for me, and it was extremely delicate work. And I suppose it's much more different from, say, carving a delicate face, because that requires some delicate touch, whereas this one, you just need a lot of patience. As for the shape of the snake skull, I decided to go with something that's not a snake skull, something like a dragon's head. I believe that this wouldn't necessarily be too far from the lore of the Harry Potter series. In the Chamber of the Secrets movie, the snake or the basilisk that Salazar Slytherin had doesn't exactly look like a snake to me. It looks more like a sea dragon or some sort. So that's where I'm drawing the inspiration from. Besides, snake skulls doesn't even look like a snake, so yeah. Perhaps the only thing I'll keep that's similar to a snake skull would be the lower jaw, which would be disjointed. I think this gives it a much more interesting and scary appearance. Now at this point it looks more like a dead cow, so hopefully some fangs will solve the issue. To make the fangs is rather simple as well. I'll simply roll out a tiny little tip of polymer clay and then cut off the extremely delicate tip of the polymer clay. Once I have a sufficient amount of it, I will take a pair of tweezers and then, using it as a support, I'll try to give the fangs a slight curve. After it's been baked, I will give the ends a slight shaving and then simply stick it onto the jaw. Well, what do you think? I think that looks rather interesting. To bring out the details more, let's give it a paint, and for that I'll start off with our base coat of white color, and then follow it up with a skull type of dirt color. Once that's done, to bring out the contrast of the eyes and other things, I will apply some washes here and there to hopefully bring out the depths. Once that's done, it's just a matter of sticking it onto the neck, but before that I wanted to add some splashes of water here. To make the splashes, I'll be using a silicone mat, on top of which I will use a bit of UV resin. Now I tried to make splashes on this silicone mat, but as you can see, the surface tension of the UV resin is simply too high and it wants to clump up together. So I thought of an idea to blast it briefly with UV lights. This way, it turns the surface into a jelly type thing which I can simply stretch out easily. Once I have a decent shape, I will blast it with a hot air gun and then wrap it around an aluminium foil. I'll then take it out of the aluminium foil and then try to create a wavy, splashy pattern. With that done, it's simply a matter of sticking it onto the neck using some more of UV resin. With the splashes secured, I'll then stick the head onto its neck. To add certain effects to the water splashes, I'll be using these water texture paste that I used for my Ori diorama. I think I'll be very gentle on this and apply very little of it. I'll also finish it up with a wider, foamier water texture on the surface to make it look a bit more interesting. With that done, I think I should be able to peel the mask off and let's work on some stuff on the wall. Now what I have here is called an invisible pen. It's just some fluorescent ink and I'll use it to scribble some runic words onto the wall, keeping in theme with the secrets of the Slytherin house. These runic words would be the names of my YouTube channel members: Nikki Clark, Bunny Poncha, Shillin, and Theo Atram, and finally Jessica Champs from Patreon. Thank you so much for your extra support on my journey. With that done, let's see how the diorama turned out. Well, here is the Slytherin Common Room diorama thing, and I'm fairly happy with the way it came out. It's not too bad. The resin cure was successful, the sculpting work was great, and I learned quite a lot of things, patience being one of them. And so what can I improve on? Well, the first thing I can improve on would be eliminating the swirls in the resin. This could probably be solved by getting a paint mixer or some sort. The next one would be that my sculpting work is still not very smooth. It's okay, but I'm still struggling to keep things smooth and streamlined. That's something I need to work on. And finally, the overall appearance, although I was aiming for a liminal-space kind of vibe, I don't really think this is a liminal space and more of an empty common room. It almost feels like everyone left the common room, so I don't know. Let me know what you think about this. Thank you so much for joining me this far. Have a good day and cheers.